Hey guys, and welcome to this Football Manager Youth Development Guide. Today we're going to look at youth development from the point of view of lower league management all the way up to the top flight. We're going to use some advice from Sports Interactive as well as my own personal experience with Scarborough Athletic. And I'm going to bring you up some screenshots just now to show you the sort of development you could see by following this setup. The likes of Saltella, Williams, Gale, they've all been with my side since the National League North all the way up to the Premier League, gaining back-to-back promotions and playing first team football every single season. You've got two completely different approaches for a top flight team with good facilities and coaches all the way down to the lower leagues where you have very little to work with, but we're going to cover both in today's guide. So, why should we approach lower league development differently to top flight development? Well, to understand this, you need to understand what influences a player's growth in the first place. You've got your training, your facilities, your coaching staff. You then got game time, and not directly influencing development, but their ceiling is their potential and their personality. Let's begin with the most important part of youth development, which is balancing training with matches. To do this, we're going to use Seb's advice. He works at Sports Interactive, so he knows his stuff, and he recommends young footballers need training and playing time throughout their career to develop fully. Under 18s should focus on quality training, over 18s on appropriate amount of game time. That's a really important point we're going to come back to in just a second, so remember that. But by appropriate training, he means schedules, quality facilities, good coaches and suitable workloads. Bear in mind, if you're in the lower leagues, you're not going to have good facilities and you're not probably going to have good coaches. You may even be part-time, which means you're not even going to have much time to train your players, which means the only way to develop them is through game time, and I mean appropriate game time. Now, appropriate game time can be measured by a player's average ratings and his general performances, and you also need to manage his fatigue and his workload. You don't want that fatigue dropping, I would say, below 85%. Generally needs to be around the 90s so that you can both train well and perform well on the pitch. Saltella started with us in the National League North. We didn't turn professional until we got into League 2, yet he managed to develop season in, season out. He performed really well in the league, and if it wasn't for this first team football, he wouldn't have got anywhere near the sort of development we have seen. Now, something I can't understate is the fact that the potential of a player is vital to how quickly they will develop. If their ceiling is all the way up there, they're going to naturally progress much quicker to get there. Sometimes you do get slow burners, but in general, the bigger the potential, the faster I found my players developed, which made it much easier to progress them. Rob Gale's a good example of that. He was a Premier League potential player, and he's almost there now. Look at his history. He started with us in National League North. Every single season he played fantastically well, and that is why he developed. Now, potential alone is not enough. A player with a bad personality will never reach that potential. I find professional, determined or ambitious players are best, but likes of a model professional, resolute personality, spirited, they tend to develop really well. Of course, the squad's overall personality is going to make a difference. That is going to influence individuals, but you can hone in on specific players' personalities and try to pass those on to youth players by throwing them all into the same mentoring group. I actually signed 5 players purely to pass on their personalities. Nicrasto, Dia, Cole and Tonti, they're the main ones. They're never going to get a game, but they've got resolute, perfectionist, resolute and model professional personality, all of which I want to pass on. Now, how much of that personality is going to get passed on to other players goes on their social group, the hierarchy, and their estimated influence on the group. So it is a hard mix to get, but over time you get a feel for what works and what doesn't. If you do enjoy this guide, why not subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to get notified of new guides as and when they go live. And if this one does help, give us a thumbs up, it'd be much appreciated. Now, I tailored my first team training around those youngsters. Remember, they're only 16 years old, but because they're playing first team football, they're training with the first team. And different attributes rise and fall at different points in a player's career. So naturally, we need to target the attributes that are going to rise fastest when they're youngest first. Let's use Seb's advice to try and explain that a little bit better. Some players can break the mould, but as a guideline, physicals develop earliest, technicals follow, and mentals develop latest. Some more detail on that. Physicals will generally develop by the age of 24. Acceleration, pace and agility develop and decline earliest. Strength and jumping reach can develop later. Technicals can develop at any time, but they generally develop during the player's peak years. That's kind of their mid-20s for most positions, but that can vary by position. And mentals develop best from their mid to later years. So you've got a clear definition of what you should train when in a player's career. So obviously I was tailoring a lot of my training towards physical development in the early days. Of course, because attributes grow at different rates at different ages, you are better off training your youth team and your first team separately. Having the under 18s trained through youth schedules means you can target those physical attributes and the areas that you really want to hone in on. The problem you've got is you can't do this unless you've got good under 18 coaches. Your goalkeeping coach, fitness coach, assistant manager and yourself, I believe, all act as coaches for the under 18s. The rest are entirely made up of under 18 specific coaches. And if you can't get good coaches in general, you ain't got a cat in hell's chance of getting good under 18 coaches, as is evidenced here in my coaching overview. I've only managed to get one good under 18 coach so far, despite being in the Premier League. So we're managing to do decent with the goalkeeping coaching and with the fitness coaching, but the rest is pretty abysmal other than the one I am handling, which is possession and tactical attacking. Of course, my youth aren't going to develop with this type of coaching until I can invest more in the youth coaches. So it's chicken and egg. I decided to prioritise those youth players, putting them to the first team and tailoring my first team training and their attribute development around the under 18s and sacrificing the development of the older players who I knew wouldn't really be required in a few seasons time anyway. But if you're in the Premier League or you're an established top flight team, you'd be better off putting all of your youth team into the youth schedules so you can really hone in on those physical attributes, as Seb was pointing to. Now, while physicals do develop quickest early on, that doesn't mean you should only target that. You also want to look at a player's weaknesses. So let's take Santella for instance. Through his additional focus, I was generally doing his quickness, but I was alternating every other month to either his finishing or his off the ball movement, because both were quite low. And if you have a look at his progress, you'll see that in his increases. He increased by 4 on his finishing, which way outlined the rest of his technicals because we focused on it, as did his long shots, and then his off the ball movement went up 7, which is huge. Again, we put a lot of focus onto that, and his quickness training 4 and 3. So that's proof that the individual training does actually work. Another important thing to get right is the intensity level. I set this to automatic so that it picks up on the team's intensity level. Now you can set that from the training sidebar and rest tab. In here I literally set it to no pitch time if they're under 59% condition, half intensity, then normal intensity up to 79% condition, and we go to double intensity if they're 80% or more on the condition. That's because they can handle more training and they can handle more game time when they're at that sort of level. I generally find it's a good balance between fatigue and injury. Just as important as the individual focus is the position, role and duty training. Now I set position based on the position they're going to play on the pitch because positional familiarity is very important and you can train that. However, role familiarity does not exist. All that is a FM's representation of the attributes a player has and how suitable he thinks those attributes are to the role. There's no such thing as a barometer of a player can be X good in a role because he's played it so often. It's only the attributes that make the difference. So in training, when you're selecting the role, you want to pick a role that does the attributes you want to develop, not necessarily the role you want him to play in. For instance, look at Yusuga. I develop him as an advanced playmaker because it targets a nice rounded amount of attributes. Crossing's the only thing that's missing, so I generally target that in the additional focus. If I was trying to develop him as a winger on support duty, you'll see far less attributes are getting targeted. He would be a more specific type of player for my tactic in the long term, but he would be a far less well-rounded player. The other thing you need to remember when selecting role and individual training is that not every attribute is weighted the same. Each attribute takes up a different amount of current ability. Michaelinho FM actually did a post on attribute weight, which I'll link in the description. It's really handy stuff, and I'll pull up a graphic from that post now. As you can see, each position has different weight for every attribute in every area. So a striker, for example, will use up 4.5 of his current ability when he goes up one level in acceleration. However, he'll only use up 1 current ability for his balance. So you're using up 3.5 more points of his current ability by training 1 more point of his acceleration over his balance. So that explains why some players with incredible physicals seem to struggle to develop other areas of the game and don't seem as technically gifted or as well-rounded mentally. And a quick word on the facilities, because it's really important to understand where you should be investing your money. Basically, the only thing that affects the training of the players you can see in any of your teams, whether that's your under 18s, under 23s or your senior team, are the training facilities. That's the only thing. Massive misconception within the community is that youth facilities are what train your under 18s. All that does is impact the development of new gens. Youth recruitment impacts the quality of new gen you're going to find, whether that's abroad or from home. Junior coaching is the level of coaches that coach your new gens. That's the invisible players that you can't see until they come through your youth recruitment. So essentially, it's the coaches you don't hire, you don't see, and you don't know about. If you want to basically increase the level of your new gens coming through the system, all the thing you can't see, you need to improve your junior coaching. So in a nutshell, training facilities, if you're wanting to improve the level of training at your club for the players you can see, improve your training facilities. Youth facilities, youth recruitment and junior coaching are the 3 you should improve if you want to improve the quality of new gens coming through on youth intake day. I will leave a link to this post that you can see right now in the description. That way you can go back to it and reread it in your own time, maybe digest it a little bit better. And there's a lot more information in the post itself from what there is in the video. I'll leave a load of other links in the description of this video. That way you can see all the guides that I do and hopefully get some good information there. As I always say, if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe and hit the bell button. That way you get notified of new guides and episodes as they go live. Give us a thumbs up if this guide helped. It'd really be much appreciated. It helps the channel grow and get seen due to the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't done so already, why not start following our See Does Can Fly series? I'll leave that as a card at the end of the video for you to jump into, get caught up on that. It's a really great series. We started from level 7, we're all the way up to the Premier League now, so we're now hitting the peak of the save, and it's great fun to follow the progress of the class of 2020, which is all the players that you saw at the start of the video. Right guys, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.